Evil. Well, if you ask me, Valisthea reeks of it. To be fair, the fact that Final Fantasy XVI took a much darker turn in terms of its story elements was a good move, making it very satisfying when Clive and the party were able to uncover the source of evil and defeat him once and for all and restore peace to the realm. Now, with that casting a massive shadow over the lands in the duration of the game, there are many characters who personified evil in different ways. If you recall, I did a video not too long ago covering the person I could argue was the most evil. While he didn't get as much time on the screen as other characters, the actions he did and the conversations and dynamic with Jill was enough for us to predict how he truly was as the de facto ruler of the Iron Kingdom. Now, of course, there were comments that the most evil person is the topic of today's lore video, and honestly, if there was anyone not named ULTIMA to take that title, it would be her, which is why it's apropos that I would cover her in today's lore video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We are back in Valisthea as we cover some Final Fantasy XVI lore. If you are enjoying the Final Fantasy content, consider subscribing to the channel as there are plenty of Final Fantasy topics we can cover. I am slowly playing through the game, so expect to see more Final Fantasy titles to be covered in future videos. Let me know what Final Fantasy games you would like me to cover as well in the near future. There are still quite a few Final Fantasy games I am looking to get started with, not to mention some Final Fantasy XIV, which I have been playing a little bit. As to what I'll be doing in terms of content, I'm not sure yet, but keep an eye out anyways. Consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see all these things and more. There are many reasons as to why Annabella Rosfield is perhaps the most evil character in all of Final Fantasy XVI. In some arguments, even more than ULTIMA himself, despite ULTIMA being the godlike being responsible for attempting to destroy humanity in order to restore his own species. But I think from a personal level, it would be Annabella. So, what exactly did she do to obtain this title? And who exactly is she? We will explore this as we will go through the lore behind Annabella Rosfield. Annabella Rosfield was born from a noble family who had a history of marrying into the Rosfield clan and bearing children that would become the icon of the Phoenix. Honestly, this phrase alone was enough to fully describe the driving force behind her upbringing. When you are raised in a family with a history like that, one can predict what kind of life and upbringing that would bring. It's very likely that her parents were just like her, if not worse, as they would have likely installed the elitist beliefs into her. It's one thing to be part of the status quo of Valisthea in that bearers are treated as poorly as they are, but the way Annabella goes about it is much worse, despite her husband Elwyn's attempts at making Rosaria good for bearers to live in. It's very hard to resist against the established society nonetheless. Annabella Rosfield is the mother of both Clive and Joshua Rosfield, the latter being the dominant of the Phoenix. It is also very evident with her viewpoints how she saw and treated her children. Despite Clive being her eldest son, she treated him with disdain and pretty much treated him like a peasant when she realized that he did not possess the power of the Phoenix, yet was very protective and treated Joshua very well because of his status, showing how much value she puts in the societal norms. She also did not think highly of Jill, despite her status as the dominant of Shiva. Due to her being from the Northern Territories, Annabella saw her as a savage. Growing tired of the status of Rosaria, Annabella conspired with the Holy Empire of Sanbreque, making an agreement with Sylvester Lesage to have the Empire take over Rosaria and become part of the Holy Empire. With her help, Imperial soldiers and traitors were able to launch a sneak attack to her husband and children at the disaster of Phoenix Gate, resulting in the deaths of Elwyn and the disappearance of Joshua. As Annabella looked around the casualties showing no concern, she thought of having Clive be killed, but decided against it because of how highly praised he was for his swordsmanship, so he was made a frontline soldier and be marked as a branded. Annabella would later on marry Sylvester and bear a son with him, Olivier. Although her newly obtained status as the Empress of Sanbreque due to her marriage to Sylvester, there were many within the Empire's ranks that were quite skeptical of her. After all, how could someone who easily betrayed her own kingdom and her own husband and children be trusted and know she won't do the exact same thing to them? Despite all those skepticisms, she was given free will to do as she pleased because she had the backing of the Emperor himself. Upon her ascendancy to the throne of the Empire, she was given full control of Rosaria and, to no one's surprise, became an absolute nightmare to live under her rule, with Varys being treated much worse than under the time of Elwyn Rosfield. She even had her own guard detail, known as the Black Shields, a play on words on the shields of Rosaria, sworn protectors of the realm. Having plans to make Olivier the next Emperor of Sanbreque, she would develop a hatred for Dion, often talking down to him due to his status as the son of the Emperor and a mistress, making him ineligible to become the new Emperor despite being the dominant of Bahamut, or so she argues. However, we know that Olivier was being manipulated by ULTIMA. Well, he was his vessel. So despite her ambitions being possibly driven by the influence of ULTIMA, one could also argue that because of her true nature and her beliefs, that she was driven by her own ends to commit such atrocities. It actually speaks volumes as to how evil one person could be if it's hard to agree that the influences of a godlike being could explain some of the evil actions she has committed when she has a history of seeing things in a very extreme and radical sense herself. After discovering her plans on replacing him with Olivier, Dion attempted an uprising. Having the support of the Order of the Knights Dragoons, Dion confronted his father, in which Olivier revealed himself as a vessel of ULTIMA, causing Dion to accidentally kill his father and finally snap, turning into Bahamut and attacking the capital, with Annabella in shock in the process. When Clive and Joshua attempted to save Dion from Bahamut's grasp, they came across their mother one last time, and she admitted that all of her actions were nothing more than an attempt at self-preservation. Being able to bear a son that would have the blood of both Phoenix and Bahamut while ruling the Empire, as well as her being upset since Clive was not born as the dominant of the Phoenix, that would cause people to believe that he was not her legitimate son, despite him being stronger in combat while Joshua was more book-smart.
Honorable Elwyn, always thinking of his precious homeland. But what worth is a homeland in a world beset by the Blight?
Father did not seek to protect his country. He sought to protect his people.
A leader's duty is not to protect his people. It is to protect the source of his sovereignty. The noble blood that runs in his family's veins. So long as this bloodline remains unbroken, what does it matter if a nation falls? One can always found another. Unlike him, I did my duty. I preserved my line. I bore a son of the noblest blood, to whom the whole world might kneel. That is why I gave Rosaria to Sanbreque, that I might join my line with the Lesages and birth a savior of this benighted land, blessed by both Bahamut and the Phoenix!
All these reasons disgusted Clive and caused him to disown her as his mother, a moment that I'm sure we all were waiting for. But of course, one could not so easily turn against their own mother despite how she treated him. So even though it took him 28 years to do so, I am glad that he found this courage to stand up to his own mother. When Phoenix and Ifrit defeated Bahamut, Dion reverted to his original form, and after seeing the shadow of ULTIMA over Olivier, Dion killed the latter, banishing the influence of ULTIMA over the Empire. Distraught at the death of her son, Annabella fell into a panic and met an ending that was both cruel but unsurprising considering what she had fallen into. While Joshua felt pity for his mother after what had happened, Clive and Jill felt less so, and more of a burden of the past being removed from their shoulders. And that ends the tale of Annabella Lesage. Honestly, I can't say I felt sorry for her, but at the same time, I also think we did not get a good enough background from her to fully understand where she came from. It wasn't until the first sentence of this lore video after the introduction that I started to understand her point of view. See, when I analyze antagonists, I like to see their own point of view as it helps understand why they turned out the way they are by the time they got into the games. This was the case with Seymour, who we saw quite a bit of a sad background when we spoke with his mother at Bodge Temple. But with Annabella, we barely got to see any of that. I think if we got a glimpse of her background at some point during the games, then perhaps the history of her family, or how she was raised, then her viewpoints could be slightly more understood. But there is also a possibility that this was purposefully omitted by the developers because they wanted us to see Annabella in a certain way, which I definitely think worked if that was the case, sticking to the dark themes of Final Fantasy XVI's story. Anyway, let me know what you thought of Annabella Lesage and leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more Final Fantasy content. Other than that, this is Enzo signing out, and I will see you all soon.